how would you feel as Qui-Gon Jinn, who is a Force ghost, mind you?
I know where this is going.
He's a Force ghost. Learns the day after he dies. Apparently, they created some sort of magical thing where the moment you get stabbed in the stomach, you no longer die. Gosh dang it, I feel bad for him.
The lethality of the lightsaber has significantly decreased in the last couple years with Disney. It does diminish the importance of Qui-Gon's, not sacrifice, but his death.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World!
I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome everybody to the One-Eyed Film Podcast. I'm your host Seth Mossberg, and today we are talking about the best franchise in the history of filmmaking. Some may argue. My guest will argue that. Isaac is here with us today.
I'm going to argue that 100%. Dude.
There's a lot to talk about. And Star Wars, such a pivotal franchise in movie history, both with technology that it pushed and the stories that it told and the pop culture that was created around it. And I'm excited to talk about that over these next 3 episodes. We're going to be covering the prequels today. In a couple weeks, we'll be covering the original trilogy and then the sequels after that. Be prepared for very hot takes when it gets to that point. But we're going to be talking about the prequels today. We're going chronologically instead of release order. I don't care. It makes sense for people who aren't Star Wars nerds, okay? But yeah, the prequels were a weird point, I suppose, in movie making. I think it's so interesting. I understand George Lucas's vision and his desire to do to utilize all this green screen and CGI. I understand that he saw the potential and he wanted to at least work on it. It was almost like James Cameron in Avatar, where he knew that it existed, that technology existed, and so he made a movie with that technology. And I think that's where Lucas's head was when he realized that his story of Star Wars could be used with green screens and a bunch of CGI stuff that can enhance it. And so he writes these big world building areas and things that were just way better than the original trilogy in the
He's
sense
like a little
that,
child is what you're saying. A little child.
more or less. Yeah. I mean, thinking about comparing the point by the time they got to the Revenge of the Sith, probably my favorite opening to a movie, at least of that style. Like that's so fun to watch every time, and that still looks amazing compared to just their limitations back when they made the original trilogy. So
it looks amazing, and the acting, like it feels like especially with some of the modern stuff, and I know we're not really talking about it all that much now, but with some of the modern stuff that has come out of Star Wars, it kind of feels like they're just sitting in like a fabricated cockpit for them, and it's just green screen around them, and they're just faking like it's hard to do stuff. Like with that, they weren't actually in space, but they made it look so realistic with the acting that they had that it's part of what sells it as one of the greatest intros ever.
You were talking just about Revenge of the Sith opening.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about acting, and I was like, the prequels aren't known for their incredible acting. And why is that? Like, I think Lucas has always been known for his stiff dialogue, and that's both a weak link and a strength of his style. And it's really weird because it embodies the prequels so much, and it's coming around to where they were really hated when they were released. And yet now they're memed and loved and stuff like that I think makes them so much more fun to watch. I don't see the stiff dialogue as a weak link. I see it as something that's charming about those 3 movies specifically.
Well, yeah, and I think a part of it is, Lucas had his 3 episodes, the original 3 episodes, and then when he wrote the prequels, he had his very first episode, The Phantom Menace, he didn't know what he was working with cast-wise. He had to start over from scratch, essentially. Mm-hmm. And it feels kind of stiff, especially in that one, because he doesn't know what he's working with. He's kind of feeling out his characters, what his actors can do, especially when you get to Revenge of the Sith. He knows how they're supposed to act. The actors have the mannerisms down. It feels like a more flowing story because he's gotten to know them and he's gotten to essentially raise them as he wants.
I would say the part where it kind of fell short was that you had to get through episode 1 and 2 to get to that point, and he was working with them to grow the character through those movies. And that's why I believe Revenge of the Sith is so good, is because it's almost, I would say, almost peak George Lucas, because I feel like if he had kept going with his movies, that could have been peak Star Wars. But we're not getting there yet.
No.
I think, yeah. Oh, no.
Was question I have for you. Was the wait worth it? Those first 2 movies, kind of struggled through them. Was it worth it for Revenge of the Sith?
I don't know what pre-production looked like for those movies, but I almost wish he had a more solid plan. And this is not like in reference or in comparison to the sequels that very obviously didn't have a plan. But as we were talking about that kind of growing and learning through those first 2 movies, and even technology developing, I feel like possibly would have done him better to wait 5 years if he, looking back, possibly waiting 5 years to start those movies, both with culture and technology. But he couldn't have known that, so I don't blame him for starting when he did.
Yeah, he couldn't have known that waiting 5 years, as you say, would have made such a huge difference on the way it was received. But also he had a plan, and he wanted to complete the plan, and time was running out for him. He had to do something to keep it alive, and that was what he did. And despite it not being well received at the time, in the end, it ended up being fantastic, minus one character.
Care to expound on that?
Comic relief. If comic relief was slamming your head into a brick wall and then watching somebody try to talk that garbled up, concussed way that the words got through to you, that's about the comic relief that we're talking about.
Why do you hate Jar Jar Binks so much?
I don't hate Jar Jar Binks exactly.
This is a safe space. You can say what you want.
Okay then. All my emotional baggage I've brought along for 13 years. It's about to get unpacked. No, I think the actor who played him was doing what he was told. Mm-hmm. The way that he talks is stupid. What Lucas was trying to do was imitate Yoda, who was so successful with the funny way he talked. And he tried that with Jar Jar, and it didn't work. And he decided he had to bring him back for a second and a third appearance, hoping it would make a difference, and it did not.
To be fair, he didn't have that prominent of a role in the other appearances. It's almost a cameo at that point.
But it was still enough of an appearance where it made a difference, and that was the issue. Right? In the first one, he had such a huge role. Like, he was such a big part of it that it was like, oh my gosh, I'm sick of this guy being on screen. Give me back the little guy who doesn't know how to talk in Anakin. Give me him, whatever. By the time we got to episode 2, you open up with Anakin and Obi-Wan riding up the elevator. It's one of the opening scenes. It's not the opening scene. And the very first character we see when that elevator door opens is Jar Jar Binks yelling at us. And it's just, why him again? Again, I'm not slamming the actor. He did what he was told. But gosh dang it, I wanted someone new. I was hoping.
Who's it going to be? Oh, it's that guy.
It's like, episode 3, like, is it going to be, we're going to get a new comedic relief? There's so many different options, right? We've had the Clone Wars. There's new people we're being introduced to. It could be literally anybody. Comedic relief, so many options. Oh, great. It's Jar Jar Binks again. Can't wait for the rest of this movie. Which ended up being a really good movie. Yeah, I know.
You think episode 2 is a good movie?
No. But frankly, no. It wasn't a good movie. Better than some of the other movies that have been made since then? Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, that's my little rant. I really wish he was a Sith Lord. Gosh dang it, George. That would have been wonderful. But
would that have reconciled everything that you witnessed in episode 1?
100%. If it was revealed that Jar Jar was a Sith Lord, oh my gosh, I would have loved him. I would have gone back and been like, you're a genius. Oh, he wasn't. That lives on in film and Robot Chicken.
Yeah. Let's work our way through those movies. Yeah, the first 2 really were hated just because of, I guess the first one was hated because of content. It's very political. That's what it's known for. It's a lot of politics in a movie about war. Something I noticed about lightsaber evolution in Star Wars, at least in the order of production. You had blue and red, just kind of opposite colors, not actual opposites, but good and bad. And then Luke gets his green lightsaber. So then you have another variant, but it's still a lightsaber. Then he gets to the prequels and he realizes I can make these a lot more interesting. And so he makes Darth Maul's lightsaber. He makes Dooku's lightsaber. It just makes them a little bit more cool. A lot of people argue that lightsabers are the best fictional weapon ever to be created, and I think that's true. They're just so fun. Like my roommates have the expensive glowing ones that make noise when you string them around. It's just so fun. But then he makes them cooler by making versions that wouldn't work as swords. Lightsabers are already unique in that they're like swords in the sense that they're used like swords, but they still, it's not like they have a sharp end that you need to make sure you're cutting with or anything. It's universally dangerous. And so you can't have a double-bladed katana or something like that. You can't, I mean, can you? Is there something?
So if what you're referring to is double-bladed broadswords and all that, if what you're referring to is two swords like Darth Maul, I can't remember exactly when. There is a historical example of there being like two swords put together so that the blades are sticking out opposite ends. Don't think it was very effective, but there is a historical example of that. And there's,
I'm sure someone tried it.
I'm sure somebody was stupid enough to try it and then chopped their ear off or something and went, it's a dumb idea.
Yeah. And along this line of lightsaber evolution, then in the sequels, you get Kylo Ren's crossblade lightsaber, you get Evil Rey's foldable lightsaber. We'll get to that later. It's just don't talk about it. Hold your thoughts. We'll get to it in a couple weeks.
Fine.
It kind of went off the rails in the sequels. That goes without saying. But this was in the Phantom Menace. You started to see the evolution of lightsabers and how they got cool. I can't imagine the reactions of when it was revealed that Darth Maul had a double-bladed lightsaber. That's like, we have that context in our head because that's pop culture. That we just generally know that if you know a little bit about Star Wars. That wasn't a consideration for anyone up until 1999. And then you see that in Phantom Menace, and that probably just blew your mind. Like, I wish I could have seen that for the first time and had that reaction.
I do remember the first time I ever watched The Phantom Menace. It was with my dad. He was the one who introduced me to the entire Star Wars. And I watched them 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Correct order.
Mm-hmm. The correct order.
Yep. But when we watched The Phantom Menace and we got to that the duel on Naboo, where it was revealed he had a double-bladed lightsaber, I remember just looking over at my dad and being like, "You're allowed to do that? That's awesome!" just the joy of seeing that. And I can't imagine that being in a theater surrounded by a bunch of other Star Wars nerds. Oh, that would have been so cool. Yeah.
My first experience with the Phantom Menace was the pod race, which is a really unique addition to the story, I suppose. Might have been unnecessary, but it was also more of like, let's see what we can do, because it was one of those things that was a feat of technology trying to make those look good. And I think a lot of it still holds up today. But my dad had his surround sound system that was just so fun hearing the engines rumble past you and you would crank it and it would be so fun to watch. That was my first experience. And then watching the whole movie kind of bored me. The lightsabers were cool. Liam Neeson was cool, and the pod race was cool. Everything else just kind of...
Yeah, I watched during my first couple of like individual rewatches of The Phantom Menace. I watched the first like 15 minutes up until they met Jar Jar, and I skipped ahead until they got into the city and they cut down some droids. Watched the space battle and skipped ahead until the exciting stuff on Tatooine with the pod race and Darth Maul. Skipped completely through the Coruscant part until we got back to exciting stuff on Naboo. I watched the good stuff. How would you feel as Qui-Gon Jinn, who is a Force ghost, mind you?
I know where this is going.
He's a Force ghost. Learns the day after he dies, apparently they created some sort of magical thing where the moment you get stabbed in the stomach, you no longer die. Gosh dang it, I feel bad for him. He would have been, if he would have survived one more day, if they would have postponed their attack, he would have lived. And oh man, I wanted to see more of Liam Neeson. I'm not gonna lie, that would have been awesome. Watching a Qui-Gon versus Dooku fight would have been awesome.
Yeah, because Dooku was canonically his master. I think that was established, especially in Tales of a Jedi. The lethality of the lightsaber has significantly decreased in the last couple years with Disney, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the sequels and probably the TV shows. It does diminish the importance of Qui-Gon's, not sacrifice, but his death. And it's frustrating that that used to hold so much weight to it, and now it's just meaningless because it could have been prevented. And that's kind of been the joke of Obi-Wan after he talked to Qui-Gon's ghost at the end of his show, when he says, and the meme is, why didn't you just force heal my impalement? It's the joke now, but it's sad that it's at that cost of Qui-Gon's death,
Yeah, I understand why. I understand why he had to die, because they had to make it so that Obi-Wan was the master, so that all of the stuff that happened in the original trilogy made sense. But Disney has shot themselves in the foot in that. And again, this is something we can talk more on later, but they've shot themselves in the foot in that in the original 6 movies, they did such a good job of showing, as you said, the lethality. It is so clear that this thing will kill you. You don't, Anakin's arm got chopped off, no problem. His Qui-Gon getting stabbed, no problem. Darth Maul cut in half, no problem. It's so clear, and that's what makes it so exciting. Anytime there's a lightsaber duel in these original 6, was you knew one wrong move and this character is dead. One wrong move and suddenly you're missing an arm, or your favorite protagonist is suddenly missing this or is dead. And that's what made it so good.
There's no more stakes. It's just oh, they'll be fine. That started, we're jumping ahead of ourselves, but that started with Rey and Kylo's fight where she force healed him, and then it got to Reva getting stabbed twice, the Grand Inquisitor getting stabbed once and coming back. I'm gonna hate on your favorite show right now, but
oh, don't worry. I've hated on that I've hated on that. Yep, go ahead. Continue.
I thought you were super excited about Ahsoka.
Oh, I am super excited about Ahsoka.
Okay. You just don't like that one move where Sabine survives her impalement.
Yeah. Again, there's no stakes to it now. It's like, oh, they got stabbed. Literally, when it happened, I turned to my sister and I said, well, I know she's coming back next episode, so, oh well, she might as well just have gotten a little bruise or something. We can discuss it when we talk about Ahsoka, but the stakes nowadays aren't as high as they were back in the original 6. And George did such a good job on that, of making it, even with the blasters. We talked about it in Andor. They look like they do damage. We got back to the original 6 movies, where it was like, you get shot, you're dead. It was very clear. And again, that's what made it so good, was the knowledge of one wrong move, and it's over.
Yeah. The same thing with the stakes being so high in pod racing. That kind of had, some of them crashed into fiery balls and blew up and probably died. And yeah, they're side characters, but there were stakes in that. You understood the gravity of Anakin, the semi-protagonist of the story of A Phantom Menace. Obviously, he's kind of the main character of the whole saga, but the intensity of him, especially at his age, flying and racing. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's good storytelling in the sense, I think it's good storytelling, but good storytelling needs a good output, and the output in this case was bad dialogue, and that made it fall flat sometimes.
Yeah.
The story and the action carried that movie, and probably the second movie as well, which we can move into now, Attack of the Clones. I've seen a couple different rankings of certain people who put either Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones at the bottom of their 6 movie tier list, the ones that are actually canon. And
Gosh.
So what are your thoughts on Attack of the Clones in general, how it was executed, growing Anakin up so quickly, the incredible dialogue that has been memed out of existence these last 5 years?
Yeah, I did kind of what I did with episode 1, in that I skipped through the large portion of him and Padme talking ever. Yeah, the dialogue that was written for the two of them in their little dating scenes or whatever, written by somebody who was a nerd. To be honest, I don't think I could do any better, but it was painful. It was brutally painful. I can understand why some people would rank it lower. I don't think I would. I think Phantom Menace is on the bottom, mainly just because Attack of the Clones has more interesting stuff to it. There's more going on. You've got the different, there's less dead space where awkward stuff is going on than there is in the first one. It's interesting in that you've got the main characters now splitting up. You've got Obi-Wan's thing with him on Geonosis, fighting Jango Fett, Camino, learning about the clones, all of that. Most of that, the action sequences, again, written really well. You've got Padme trying to figure out what's going on, why Obi-Wan disappeared. You've got the Jedi Council worried, trying to figure out what to do. And then you've got the big climactic ending of the giant battle, which I am not ashamed to admit I have watched so many times. Regularly, I've watched it. I've watched it on the VHS. That's really old for some people. Just imagine like a little cassette tape. You might not even know what that is. But imagine a cassette tape about 3 or 4 times bigger. And that's a VHS player.
I don't think our viewers are that young.
Okay, fine, fair.
Continue.
Also, my sister, you know who you are. I'm calling you out for breaking the VHS player, so I can't watch it anymore like that. Anyway, I'd watch it normal speed on the VHS. I'd go back and I'd watch it at the slowest speed available on the VHS. I'd watch it like I was breaking this down for some YouTube channel, even though I didn't have a YouTube channel. The same sister who broke it was sitting next to me, and she was bored out of her mind, and I was like, look, he just got shot in the back. He's a character up in the stands that nobody ever knows or cares about, but he got shot in the back, and I saw that, and it's so cool. And it was so cool that Lucas added that. He added, you can slow it down and you can see the cool moves that Jedi are doing to take down the droids. You can see the ways in which they get shot out of nowhere. Admittedly, there is one Jedi who just suddenly dies. Still confused about it to this day.
We can let that slide.
There was like over 200 Jedi he had to kill. So I think one just miraculously dropping is fine. Yeah, it was so much, not so much. It was better than the first movie, and it was a brief precursor to what we were going to get, and that's what made it, I think, so good. It was like we didn't know what was coming in Revenge of the Sith. We had no idea. But if we would have known, it would have been the perfect cliffhanger. Because it gave us a hint of the action and the brutality and violence that was going to come, and it just left it. It gave us a hint at the war against the Sith that was going on. The war against it was, yeah, I'm nerding out on it, but it was really good. I liked it.
You mentioned the Geonosis fight of the Jedi in the background actually doing stuff. And every move in the background is intentional. I saw somebody compare that fight to the throne room fight in The Last Jedi.
Yep.
And how
I get where this is going.
The people who are front and center in the fight aren't doing things. The guards, Snoke's guards in that scene, sometimes don't swing at anything. Sometimes their blades and weapons just disappear. Like, things in the foreground don't make sense in that scene. And then you talk about the Geonosis fight where things in the background that aren't supposed to be noticed are so intentional and detail oriented. I think that's what drove Lucas, is that he was detail oriented in everything that was a part of the story.
Well, yeah, he was detail oriented up the wazoo. I mean, all you have to do is look at the Death Star for that and see. I hate that we're bringing the other trilogies into it, but yes, Lucas was detail oriented. I mean, even you look at the fight after they get out of the arena with the clone troopers, and you'll see there's actual stuff going on. It's not just like Jedi running, charging forward and clones charging after them. Like there's shots that are flying through, and there are clone troopers who are, running that are getting hit and falling over. It looks real, very detail oriented. And I don't know if the props in that go to Lucas. I imagine some do. I don't know if they go to whoever was running CG. I think it was Lucasfilm, but the people there or any of that. But it was, again, I loved going back. Still mad at you, sister. I loved going back with the VHS and watching it in slow-mo and just being like, look at that and that. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that Geonosis fight is the most Jedi we've had in one area in technically the history of the films, right?
Are you talking about on screen? On screen.
Talking about on screen full out battle, lightsabers ablaze.
Yes. Yep.
That's I think one reason why it's so cool.
Because all throughout the first three movies, 4, 5, 6, and 1, we were told about how great the Jedi were, how they were such impressive battlers. They could fight like crazy. They're so good. And we never really got to see it until this, when we saw all of them, and we realized, 1, these guys are awesome, and 2, they die really stinking easy. I remember watching it and being like, that's a lot of Jedi. Man, this is going to be an absolute slaughter. It's not even going to be close. I just didn't realize which side was going to get slaughtered. You can kind of understand why when we get to the original 3, Obi-Wan just kind of seems sad when he thinks about it. Because he's kind of realized just how bad it's gotten for them, how bad it got, and how many people died because of that.
Yeah, this is the start of kind of the fulfilling of what was talked about and alluded to in A New Hope, which I think is good backstory. It was a throwaway line, and maybe George Lucas had an idea of what he wanted to do in the future, but he kind of delivered on building that and using Obi-Wan as kind of the pivotal character where, yeah, in A New Hope, he's talking to Luke about the Clone Wars and all the people he's lost and the sadness in his voice. And this is the start of that, of Jedi getting slaughtered in Geonosis and then eventually in Order 66. But then his personal hand in dealing with Jango Fett and the clones, which, speaking of, I'm going to play a sound that is just gold for any true Star Wars.
I know what it is right away.
Yes. Dude. Oh.
That,
okay. I started losing interest in Mandalorian closer to the end, but when Boba Fett launched the seismic charge in the air at those ships in The Mandalorian, I was like, oh my goodness, that's so good. It's such a good sound. And there's the meme of like, name a better sound than this. And she shakes her coffee and then is like, I got you. And then plays the seismic charge sound. Like, it's such a well sound design. It brings joy to my ears every time I hear it.
Well, yeah.
I love it.
I think part of why we love it so much is there's so much going on before that. There's music in the background, there's indistinct chatter, all of that. And he drops it and it goes dead silent. And you think, what is this? And this is going to be something that is going to wreak absolute devastation. Because the entire movie just went silent. And then that sound plays and you're like, oh yeah, we're screwed. Yeah, we're dead. There's no escaping this.
Well, there is if you're not in the two-dimensional plane that it explodes.
It's the one shortfalling of that.
But
weapon.
anything within that circle, flat circle, is devastated.
You don't think it was, just make it a little more round, just, you had to make it flat. You had to make it so there's one way to get out of it.
Just go up.
yeah, basically. I don't know why Obi-Wan was running from it.
Like
just
this, you just
up. Pretty simple if you ask me.
So all the cringy dialogue. I almost want to attribute all of the Anakin lines that are cringe to him being a young man who was very awkward with a woman. Like, that's one way you could write it. That's not how it was intended, but it's so awkward.
Yeah, and you think about it. Oh gosh, I'm debating how nerdy to kind of drop into it. We'll kind of lay off it a little bit. To put it simply, he's really not supposed to have any sort of relationship with any women, be it a friendship or anything romantic. So him trying to do this is him, that awkward time in 3rd and 4th grade when there was that girl that you liked and you tried whatever it was to get her attention and you said the stupidest stuff. That's like him, except he's going through it as a 20-year-old. So imagine going to college and saying that. That's why it feels so weird, because he's a grown-up now. She's a grown-up. And he's trying this stuff that we tried as little kids, and it's like, ew, I don't like that. Yeah,
Hayden Christensen was 19 when they were filming this. And I think he had his flaws as an actor, and people really did not like him for that. And he didn't really have that good of a acting career. Like, it was pretty stiff. And that sort of embodied the character of Anakin eventually. But I think that's me seeing it now, 20 years after it was released, more than that. I saw a video from Comic-Con, the Star Wars show or something, when they were announcing the shows or whatever, and they had Hayden there, and people were loving him, and he was tearing up because for so long he thought people hated his performance. And yet through pop culture, meme culture, and just kind of wearing it off, like, people now love his portrayal of him, and that's why he's back in Ahsoka. Maybe.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
Hold off on that.
me.
Hold off
It's
on that.
so hard.
I don't know if you're thinking good thoughts or bad thoughts about that. Like,
Oh, good. 100%
Okay.
good. 100% good.
okay, because I've heard a lot of sides pertaining to the Ahsoka show, and some of them are just disliking it because it's Disney Star Wars, and that's fair. There's been some good stuff. Anyways, we're not talking about that. Coming back to it, like I said, he started to embody who Anakin was before Darth Vader, and his stiffness became the character. Like, it wasn't intentional like that, but that's how we now see it. Zach and I just talked about Wilson Fisk in Daredevil. That was an intentional performance where he's slow to speak and very choppy and socially awkward. That was intentional. And I think the same could be said for Hayden's Anakin, where he kind of, again, it wasn't intentional, the same way Vincent D'Onofrio did it with Wilson Fisk. But that's how it comes off now, is an awkward teenager, but also kind of just a stiff talker who can be a little awkward sometimes, and then, turn into the darkest lord in the galaxy. So
And
that's how it goes.
Somewhere in the middle there, Mary's an ex-queen who has incredible power and keeps it hidden from absolutely everybody. Yeah, he played it really well. His acting skills in real life and in the movie, absolutely phenomenal.
You got a point. How do you think the lightsaber duels improved this time around? Like, I really enjoy the final fight only because I remember watching it at a young age. And it, again, learning from past mistakes and getting better at that style.
Yeah, George definitely learned from some previous mistakes that he had made. Few as they were when it came to lightsaber battles. But definitely, I like his idea of Obi-Wan and Anakin fight Count Dooku after they escape from the arena where they've been chained up. They're given replacement lightsabers that aren't theirs. And Anakin is given a green one, Obi-Wan's given a blue one, whatever. But you can tell, like, especially during their fight, they're not used to them. They don't like the lightsaber. It's very clear that it's uncomfortable to them because, again, these are ones that were given to them. These weren't ones that they made and they've grown up with. Same as when you drive a brand new car, it feels weird. It just doesn't feel right. And especially when it comes to something like that, the actors, Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor, they do such a good job of making it, of subtly making it like they're not on their peak form because this isn't theirs. There's a stiffness to the way they fight that speaks like, this isn't mine. I'm not 100% confident with it. I do like George's idea with Count Dooku's curved lightsaber. That's really cool. It was a unique way of doing it, something we hadn't seen yet, but was, again, just kind of a shocking, like, whoa, that's actually something that can happen, and it works? That's really cool. Anakin wielding two lightsabers at the same time? That was cool. We hadn't seen that up to that point. We hadn't seen somebody taking two individual lightsabers and fighting with it. And it kind of worked for him until he got overconfident. But two lightsabers at one time, again, that was something that George hadn't ever done. But he made it in such a way that and Hayden did such a great job in doing it in such a way that it made it seem like this is something, they're kind of taught how to do. Because he did it with such an ease that it was like, I'm kind of familiar to this. But he wasn't great at it like this was something he practiced. And that's with the fight choreographer and Hayden and part of George's writing of it that just made it clear, like, again, this isn't natural to them. This isn't what they're used to. And then Yoda shows up, and gosh dang, I was hoping Yoda would kick some Dooku butt. Goodness me, that would have been fun.
But he had to have compassion and save his friends.
But he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. No Clone Wars. There's no worry about Darth Vader. Yoda doesn't save them. He avoids everything that happens from that point onwards. Interesting thought. Maybe something that could be looked at in the future. Disney likes to do time travel stuff. Maybe something that could be done with that.
I think the part where he said no Clone Wars is where some people gasped because this was the perfect lead into the Clone Wars TV show. and some of the most beloved Star Wars that some people would ever attribute to. Yes, Yoda made that decision, but it needed to happen for the story to move on. And something that I was thinking about as we were talking about lightsaber battles, especially evident in Attack of the Clones, is locations and how Lucas kept moving it and changing it to give us something new. Like it wasn't a lightsaber fight, but it was combat in the rain. The Jango Fett Obi-Wan fight was legit. And then we're going to get to Revenge of the Sith in a second, but lava river and jumping from platform to platform. These are new locations. This is world building that fits with the story and is so fun to watch. It's not just another empty room. And that's what you want in your fight scenes, is to make it interesting and something new, more than just a new lightsaber, a new move, a new character, a new location. Make that something that you utilize in your fights, and I think is utilized well in a lot of the Star Wars fights, such as back to Phantom Menace, the multi-tiered platforms and the height, whether it was forced jumps to another one or kicking others off, to jumping to different platforms in Mustafar over the lava river. We'll get to this in a second.
Yeah, so you talking about it just now, especially, it just brought to my mind all of the different fights that we have in this trilogy. And it made me think back to the fights we had in the original trilogy. And all of the lightsaber fights we had in the original trilogy, they were all basically the same location. Yes, it was actually different locations, but if you look at it, it's in some sort of enclosed room with no real space to move around. Walls are right next to you. It's the same kind of color and design aesthetic for all of them. The one exception to that being Empire Strikes Back, the Carbonite area. That was cool what was done with that. Other than that, the rest of that Cloud City lightsaber fight, you could take that and move that into any one of the other fights in that original trilogy, and it would look the same, basically. Whereas you look at it here, we've got a fight in the desert. We've got a fight on lava. You've got a fight
laser walls
in the rain. You can't take those and put them into something else and it will still feel natural, because the environment that they're fighting in is so unique to that fight.
I think that comes from the technology and how in the 70s and 80s he had to work in enclosed spaces for a set. The opportunity to do environments didn't really work as well as it does now, or even in the 2000s. With green screen, that was part of him leaning into the opportunity to use this technology. He was able to make exterior environments and open up the room to no longer be a room. And that's what made it so fun to watch. Like we've said, changing it up, making something new, not just in a little gym-sized room that maybe you hit a wire, maybe you hit a wall. Like there's a lot more that's going on with these environments.
Well, yeah, and you touched on it with technology, and I don't think it was what you were intending for originally. But you look back at the lightsabers that Lucas had for that original trilogy, and it was just like camera film, essentially, on a long pole with a wire that rotated it around fast. You can't really go take that outside and use it and have it look good. You had to do it in a room. Whereas with the sequels, I mean, did they actually go outside and fight? Maybe, maybe not. But the lightsabers that they had weren't restricted by that. It was like actual, similar to what we have now. With like, you can hold it in your hand and swing it around and you can throw it from hand to hand. It feels good. Like you said earlier, it feels like an actual sword. And it was because of that upgrade and change in technology, he was now able to make it look more realistic and make it feel like it could be moved into different areas.
Yeah, the real world technology of lightsabers, or lightsaber props, I suppose, moved along with the movies. It started off with a reflective strip that would just reflect light back at the camera in a special way. Then it turned into sticks that they just put a glowing beam in front of digitally. And then for the sequels, they had basically what my roommates have, is the glowing sticks that you can fight with. Like you can swing them and clash them and they'll glow. And you can see that with the sequels that they have environment glow.
One thing I want to talk about, Seth, while we transition to Revenge of the Sith, and I got to get, it's a one-eyed film podcast, got to get that real world kind of talk in. I want to talk about Anakin, right? And especially at the end with the whole made a meme out of I hate sand, that whole speech. But what it is that I want to talk about is Anakin having to hold all that stuff inside of him. He wasn't, from the moment that he was accepted to the Jedi and he learned about the rules, he couldn't care about his mother. He couldn't care about Padme. He really wasn't supposed to care about Obi-Wan or any of the other Jedi. And we see that throughout episodes 2 and 3, and we see how that is a huge part of what made him become what he became, was the fact that he kept that to himself. As he's not supposed to he's not supposed to have that, so in doing that, he doesn't feel like he can tell anybody. And that's similar to what we experience with sin. Let's say you're at the store, right? Standing in the checkout line, self-checkout line, you slide a thing of gum into your pocket, and you walk out, you don't get caught. I have a horrible sense of guilt. If I do something wrong, I feel awful. It can be the stupidest. It can be me forgetting to lock the door to my dorm room. And I will go up to my roommate and I'll be like, I am so sorry. I feel awful inside. I'm so sorry. Could you please just forgive me? I feel awful. And I'll be like, dude, it doesn't matter. Nothing happened. I came in 2 minutes later. It was fine. But it was that sense of internal guilt, that consciousness, so to speak, that I had that made me feel bad about it. You steal that pack of gum and nothing happens. You don't have that, you have that internal sense of guilt, but you ignore it. You keep moving on. You take something a little bit bigger next time, and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. If you keep not getting caught and you're not a psychopath, there will be a sense of guilt in you. It might be brief, but there will be a sense of guilt. And if you keep that stored up, keep that frustration, that tension, that anger, that anxiety, that worry about other stuff that's happening in your life, you keep that pent up inside, you might go on a murderous rampage of a bunch of little children and all your best friends. I hope that doesn't happen, but we saw it happen with Anakin. You got to be careful what happens with that. You need to find somebody who you can talk to, who you can confide in. For me, that for a while, that was my youth pastor. He was somebody I would have, I would be able to talk to, shoot text to, and be like, hey, I just did this. I'm struggling with this. I feel awful about this. Help, please. And if you find that godly person who can help, they can be like, hey, what you did was wrong. Yeah, you messed up. Remember that God does this. Remember that God forgives you. Remember that Jesus did this for you. Having that godly person who helps walk with you helps that. Now, I'm not saying that Anakin didn't tell Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan brushed him off. Could have happened. We don't know. Hasn't fully been fleshed out. We're assuming that Anakin hid it from everybody, which he most likely did. And that's what tore him up inside. I think going back to Star Wars now, I think if he genuinely talked to somebody, I think if somebody took him seriously, because he tried with Yoda and Yoda brushed him off entirely. I think if he talks with somebody seriously, I don't think we get what happens. Mm-hmm. I think, if he, with his mom and that being the start, I think that gets resolved and he doesn't have that initial slaughter phase, and he doesn't freak out about Padme dying because his mom died.
James 5:16 says, confess your sins one to another and pray for one another that you may be healed. You're right, though. Keeping all of our wrongdoings to ourselves and bottling it up isn't going to help anything. You need people to come alongside you, whether that's a mentor or a peer, to help you through this. And Anakin tried to go to a mentor of Yoda, and Yoda was like, no, you are the problem. You got to be careful. I won't take this. This is not the Jedi way. And even Obi-Wan did a little bit of that. And so no one was really hearing him. Not saying that Anakin is justified, but that it's all connected, that his inner thoughts were a problem and no one was willing to help him. And I don't know what mental health situation is in the Star Wars universe, but they really didn't care to listen to him. And that does lead to basically the rest of the story of Anakin falling to the dark side because of his anger, because he didn't have his therapist to talk to. I don't want it to sound like that, but
sounds like a segue into an ad.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp.
That's what it kind of felt like when I was talking about it. It's like, how do I make this not sound like a segue?
We do not have any sponsors. Anyways, the whole point of the prequel trilogy is to be the story of Darth Vader and how Anakin falls to the dark side. And that comes to a peak in Revenge of the Sith. That's kind of the point of the whole movie. But it is actually a really touching movie when it comes to the feels, I would say. When you understand when you can get past some of this stiff dialogue, then you can see the heart behind the story of Anakin loving Padme, and then the problem with of brotherhood between Obi-Wan and then all of the Jedi dying and the authoritarian rule of the Emperor, like all of those coming to a head in one of my favorite Star Wars movies. And we already kind of talked about the opening scene. I just saw a video actually of Revenge of the Sith opening scene edited as though it was a James Gunn movie. That was a lot of fun to watch.
I'm gonna have to go watch that. Pardon me while
Yes,
I just
please
bring
do.
that up real quick. And
It's a lot of fun. This is probably, as I said, peak George Lucas as it stands. If he had held on to Star Wars and made the sequels as he intended, I think that could have been amazing. But this is one of the best Star Wars movie when it comes to modern production, when it comes to how everything looks, how the feels work in the story, all of that I think is great. And that was the part where I geek out about that one thing in the final fight about environment. We were talking about environment, and when the massive, I don't even know, platform collapses into the lava and starts sinking and melting, and they're trying to both climb out of the way and fight each other as they're trying not to die. That, first off, that's Anakin. That's showing Anakin's hate, is that he doesn't care for his own safety right now. He just wants Obi-Wan dead. I mean, he does care because he's trying to get out of the lava, but they're not like, pause, let's go over there. Let's duke this out on land.
Yes, I understand that. That was the one thing with the Lego Star Wars video game, right? That was the one thing that I hated about it, was that like one little episode of the episode was you teamed up with Anakin to escape the facility. And I was like, gosh, dang, like it I understand why you had to do that.
That's not how the movie goes.
Ruins the whole point of it. The whole point is that they're working against each other. They're trying to push each other into the lava. They're not, as you said, they're not like, okay, help me move this so we can find somewhere safe and then we can finish it. Because they didn't work together, it made for some amazing graphics and an incredible fight.
I think the epitome of Revenge of the Sith is in what they put in a lot of the posters of blue lightsaber versus blue lightsaber, grabbing each other's wrists, struggling over the lava as it spewed around them. That is composition of a frame. That is incredible choreography. That is not even the red versus blue of good and bad. It is what used to be good and he's questioning if it's good anymore. Battling it out. It's like, what is this? It's themes battling against each other. Completely. And it's brotherhood. Like, if you have that brotherhood mentality and focus of it, like you were my brother, Anakin, actually breaks your heart. As that might be somewhat stiff, like that is actually one of the most heartfelt lines in that trilogy, is just how Obi-Wan realizes what has happened, is on the verge of tears about it. And Anakin doesn't feel the same. He just feels hate. Yeah,
again, because what I talked about earlier, they're not supposed to have relationships in any way, be it a friendship or that feeling of brotherhood. He wasn't supposed to have it. So him saying that was like, I broke the rules for you because I loved you and saw you as a brother. And now I have to do this because you made me, because you broke the rules. But, I mean, we start the movie, that opening scene, the opening fight with Dooku. The movie starts off as good versus evil. We know Dooku is bad and Anakin and Obi-Wan are good. That entire fight scene, up until he disarms Dooku, literally, is good versus and then once he does the deed and kills Dooku, that's when the conflict really starts of the movie. That's when Anakin really starts to become unbalanced. And it culminates in, as you said, that what used to be good fights what we believe to be good, but we are now questioning whether or not that's actually good. It's a fight of, we don't exactly know who we want to root for. Well, we know because we know who Darth Vader is. But if we didn't, we don't know. We don't know who we're supposed to root for. We don't know if we want to root for Obi-Wan because we're like, is he still the good guy? Well, we know because Anakin slaughtered a bunch of children. Again, you remove that from the equation, then we get the whole. I'm starting to see why Lucas framed it the way he did. Yeah, I get it.
I think, yes, it had to match up with the beginning of A New Hope, and I think it did that well. But it still isn't just a prequel. Like, they are called the prequels as they are building to the original, but they do really well as their own movies. They hold their ground in their own strengths, and the themes of good versus evil is kind of what Star Wars embodies, and it's been used for a lot of archetypal conversation. I know I talked about it plenty in my film classes in college. It's really, the redemption of Anakin can be a whole episode in and of itself, because that is how George Lucas chose to show the rise and the fall, and then the rise of a character from good to bad and then back to good.
Well, yeah. Even so, with the original 3 movies, we saw that and we were like, okay, yeah. I mean, he was bad, now he's good. Yay. But especially when you bring into context the original 3, it makes that scene all the more powerful. You realize this man went through a lot. He grew up in a war. That was all he knew. And he dies at the end of another war to save what he couldn't save at the end of the other war. It just, yeah, it makes it so good.
I don't think I realized that before, is that in Revenge of the Sith, he was dying, or not, he wasn't dying. He didn't choose to die, but his goal was to save Padme and to save his unborn children. And then at the end of Return of the Jedi, he makes the sacrifice play to throw the Emperor down the pit to save Luke's life. Again, wrapping it up with who he loves and who he's willing to sacrifice for. And the first time around, he does not sacrifice the right way, the right reason. Like, he goes to the dark side because he thinks that will bring it to fruition, and that is the right way. Like, he thinks with all these rules in play that he's restricted and isn't able to get his full potential to save the ones he loves. And yet it's a heart change. It's not about the rules, it's about a heart change. And when Darth Vader, of all people, have a heart change and realize that his son is about to die, we can talk about this when we talk about the OG trilogy. When he realizes his son is about to die, he realizes that this isn't the way, and makes that play to save him and to be redeemed in the sense of the Star Wars series, not theologically redeemed.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up, I wanted to talk about some of the cool things that I like about episode 3. It's a geek moment. We got to talk about the fun stuff, not just the deep stuff. General Grievous, I think, was the next evolution of lightsabers. Yes, they kind of had Dexter, who had 4 arms in Attack of the Clones, but now they have a 4-armed character who is trained, who has a collection of lightsabers, and dude, I love General Grievous. He's such a good character, and I
want you to imagine, right, the writer's room for that. Okay, hear me out. We've tried guy with lightsabers coming out of both ends. We've tried 2 lightsabers. What if we try 4?
What if it's a robot with a human heart who splits his arms in half and walks like a spider in a giant donut car?
Yes. Sold.
Let's do it. Oh man, I can't imagine what George Lucas's mind is like when he thinks of things like that.
Was it based off of their surroundings, or was it just like, this is what they're coming up with late at night? They're running out of ideas.
I think they might have been on shrooms, man.
You'll never believe what I just saw. There was this spider robot in a donut. Oh.
And he coughed a lot. Also, Revenge of the Sith has probably the most memes of meme culture that come from the prequels. Like, you have hello there. Like, we have that in our intro because it's iconic. Yep. You have hello there. I have the high ground. I love high ground memes. Mm-hmm. They're so good. The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. That's a good meme. I think with the rise of meme culture in the late 10s and looking back on something that was seen as less than and inferior and people didn't really like, started to make it enjoyable and made it be like again, back to meme culture of the Leonardo DiCaprio of the, that thing, I saw it. I saw the thing. So that makes a lot of Revenge of the Sith enjoyable on top of all of the deep feels and emotions.
It was, yeah. I do think that with the rise of, as you said, that meme culture, it brought to the fore stuff that people had discarded, like the first 2 movies especially. But the Revenge of the Sith as well came back into the light, and people were like, yeah, this actually is these actually are pretty good movies considering when they were made, how they were made. It makes you wonder if, we're hating on the Disney movies now. Makes you wonder if in 20 years we're going to be looking back at this and we're going to be like, man, that was some of the best written stuff we've ever seen. And if that's the case, I'm really worried for what we'll get. Before we close, I want to ask you a question, okay? Other than the meme quotes that you've brought up, thinking back over the entire 3 episodes, what is your favorite quote from those 3 episodes? It can be funny, it can be sentimental. What is it? I can tell you mine if you want.
Go for it.
Well, I'm flipping between 2 of them. My first one is the one where the four Jedi, Mace Windu, Kit Fisto, and the other 2 show up to arrest him. And it's just him going, no, no, no. The way that he says that, I'm just like, how is that even what you think of when you see the 3 no's? You're just like, oh yeah, I'll make it sound like an old man who's dying of throat or something like that. And then the other one that
spit it out, man.
The other one that I think of, especially with meme culture and stuff, is Newt Gunray in episode 1 when he goes, no, there are 2 of them. It can be used in so many different situations and contexts where it is just perfect.
I think my favorite, as cliche as it is it's over Anakin. I have the high ground. Because it's so funny that Obi-Wan thinks that that's what's going to draw this fight to a close, is that he's 15 feet higher than Anakin.
He's 15 feet higher than a human being who can jump like 40 feet up.
Yeah.
This is the difference, I'm telling you.
To be fair, I think this is where I want to make a point of how to write backstory. I'll make the connection here in a second. Sometimes in recent years, we've gotten stories from Star Wars that we didn't ask for and backstories that were unnecessary. I think of Solo specifically. Like, we didn't need to know how he got his last name. We didn't know that his last name wasn't his last name. We didn't need to know how he got his dice. Small things like that. Whereas with something like Darth Vader and why he couldn't shoot Force lightning, it was because both his hands are robotic, and that he kind of needed to get to that point. And therefore, Obi-Wan had to cut off the other hand that was still, flesh hand. And so then he was like, okay, so then Anakin's going to jump over Obi-Wan and he's going to take off his legs and arms at the same time. So then now you need dialogue for that scene. And then he comes up with that. And Anakin's like, I'm going to show you, I'll be on the higher ground. And then Obi-Wan does the move. And that's then why Darth Vader has robotic limbs and why he can't shoot Force lightning. Like, that makes sense. It's just that the one line that was used to get there doesn't make sense. And I think that's
yeah. Well, even more than just the Force lightning, why he's in a stinking suit to begin with. But yeah, I'd like
that's true.
The entire 3 movies up to that point was building up to explain why he was in the suit, why all of that happened, why he was working for Palpatine. All of that built up to Obi-Wan standing on a tiny little hill and Anakin on a platform. And that quote, that's what kicked off everything else.
He's just messing with Anakin's ego. It's like the little kid, I'm taller than you, just because they're standing on a chair.
Yep. That's where they got it from. Lucas was having an argument with somebody, and he's like, "Oh yeah, throw that in." Yeah,
I'm taller than you. But on that note, I've played the Lego Skywalker Saga game, and they meme on themselves. Like, that line is said by Obi-Wan when he's standing on a ladder. They know it's a joke, and they play into it. In wrapping up, I had brought up how this was peak George Lucas before he sold Star Wars to Disney. I really wish, like, there's this whole alternate universe meme that kind of goes around, like, in an alternate universe, George never sold to Disney, and then we got his sequel trilogies. Like, I wish we got those with modern technology and all that, where the original trilogy shined in execution because of George's drive to make the story. The prequels shine in vision they somehow lacked in execution. Even though it was new technology, he had a bigger vision for a bigger world and more complex storylines. And I think if we had gotten a sequel trilogy from him, it would have been both those put together, a vision and execution, that I think maybe we can talk about this when we talk about the sequels and how they lost the vision, steamed forward on that execution. Like, we'll save that talk for later, but
yeah. And very briefly, we got a very small glimpse of that with the Clone Wars series, where, again, it was animated, but you got that very short glimpse of George and Filoni, who is like George's, that vision and that execution just coming together. And there are some episodes that are absolutely awful. But for the most part, it's kind of what you're going after, and I do wonder what it would have looked like.
Sounds good. We'll wrap it up there. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm glad we covered it in the amount of time that we did, but they were good movies. We'll put it that way. Could have been done better, but they were done well for the time that they are, and they've kind of been redeemed in our era of kids who watched it when they first came out or with their parents, and it's growing again in popularity, and people are loving them. So
yeah, I liked it a lot. I'm a fan.
Yeah, obviously. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching. We're going to be starting something new this week where YouTube episodes and audio episodes go up on the same day. That's Friday at 7 a.m. Just so you guys know, if you tell your friends when it launches, each week's episode is going up on Fridays. Follow us on all our socials. Join our Discord so we can have some conversation over there. Thank you for being a part of the One-Eyed family. Know that you are loved. God bless.
May the Force be with you, and God too.
Hey,
cheesy,
there you go.
Cheesy,
Go
so
on.
cheesy. I hate that. Please don't add. No, please stop.
I'm gonna.
Please don't. That's
Bye, guys.
that's a blooper. Bye. Have a great time.